Good morning, dear colleagues. Good afternoon, actually. It's been a privilege to be here, and I feel honored to share with you some situation of psychology in China with you. And many thanks to Professor Pandi, to Tusha, and to Professor all the other colleagues in the organizing committee. Thank you. It's always a risk in the end of the convention because we are not only competitive for the audience, but also everyone here are hunger for lunch. But I promise you I don't extend to my time. So my talk today is about mental health issue promotion and basic study, thank you, and some proposals of application. So in general, three parts. The first to introduce some information about Chinese Psychological Society, about Institute of Psychology, Chinese Academy of Sciences, where I'm working, and also some population aging in China, which I think is quite comparable with what happened here in India, because we have the two largest population in the world. And also some basic study on cognitive aging and mental health issues, especially the longevity, and some approaches we are trying to develop based on the Chinese culture and tradition. So, Chinese Psychological Society, which has been founded in 1921, which 1 year after the IAAP. So it is said that it was the eighth national society or association of psychology in the world at that time. So we had been active in both thematic application of psychological science, psychological knowledge, skill, but also active in international communication and cooperation. We have MOU with APA and many other national body of psychology. And here's a web page. If you're interested, you can visit to have a look. So greetings from Chinese Psychological Society. This is a standing committee of the society, and this is two presidents. I'm a president-elect. The lady here is past president, and the gentleman beside her is current president. About Institute of Psychology, Chinese Academy of Sciences, it was also we have a long history, but it was blocked or shut down during the Cultural Revolution from 1966 to 1976. That's a long story we don't have time to share here, but psychology, as many other disciplines and profession, has been shut down during the Cultural Revolution. But we recover after that and open for the world. For example, we joined Chinese Psychological Society, joined the International Union of Psychological Science in 1980s. At the same year, we joined the IAP and also involved more and more in the administrative works in the two organizations. As a national body for basic research, Institute of Psychology covered almost all areas of modern psychology. And also we try every efforts to develop the skills and techniques to help people apply the modern psychology knowledge and also improve their well-being. at either community-based or individually application. We published three journals actually, two in Chinese, Acta Psychologica Sinica and Advances in Psychology, Psychological Science, and also one English journal, Psych Journal, which has been included in social science citation indices database. So all colleagues here, you are welcome to submit your important research manuscript, especially in the experience of psychological science in serving the community, the society. It's very important to Chinese colleagues, this I'm sure. So population aging in China has a turning point in the 2000 year, in the turn of the century. Before that, the average age for the population is lower than the world, but after that, it's dramatically increasing beyond or above the world. This is some number. There's the features of population aging in China is three main features. One is very quick. The third one is the number, large number, because of the population. We are the largest population in the world. The third one is those increased elderly population, mainly from the senior elderly, namely above the 80 years old. So as we know that senile disease has a higher rate of handicapped. So those senior elderly need more long-term care in addition to the medical treatment. So the investment, either human resources and medicines and other technical investments, all are very huge. So this is a huge burden or huge needs for the society and also for the psychological discipline like psychology, and also psychology as a profession. This gives you some idea about the structure changing along the timing within 100 years. As you can see, the structure changing from pyramid to the cylinder. So this means that elderly people together with adolescents are more than those in job market. I mean, they have the work. So the real, this figure shows that our investigation for those who need long-term care. Of course, the older, the higher the needs. This figure shows you how dramatic change the severity of the population aging problem, challenging Chinese society. So as you can see that in 1982, 8% can support one elderly, but in the 10th of the century, that's less than 5. And within 7 years, less than 2. So this is a kind of a dramatic change. I think that the similar case happened here because life expectation keep increasing everywhere. I suppose India too. Raise your hands if you have any question at any time. based on those structure of the population aging, I moved to the cognitive aging, which one of the most prominent area or frontier area in the world and in China, of course. This figure has been finished by Professor Dennis Park in the United States. This is deviation or differentiation of two cognitive ability, which like a crystal or fluent cognition, measured by many different tests. Of course, in China, we have the similar trends, but level of education has been proved very important to intervene or delay the cognitive aging. But when the cognitive aging happened, is it at the early stage of human lifespan or the late? 20 years ago, the general conclusion is that it's happened quite earlier, say in 30s. I mean, even for somebody start from the 20, somebody start from the 30. So as this figure, Professor Sadhaus proved, it can happen at as early as 20s. But it depends on what kind of measure you use, okay? But there are some disputation or agreement on that conclusion because of the cross-sectional and longitudinal study have a different conclusion. For longitudinal study like this, finished by Professor Lars Nilsson in Sweden at a Betula study, they found that if you control the level of education and also use the longitudinal design or prospective design, the conclusion can be quite different. Okay, it means that at latest at the 70s, cognitive ability can be the same as the 40s. Okay, this is of course a good news for everybody, and this is more similar with our common knowledge. Okay, we observe our neighbors, our parents, our grandparents, and they still are quite active and mentally healthy. Okay, so this is a general conclusion that currently, I mean, the cognitive impairment happened quite late in the lifespan. Now, for the mental health, suicide rate, of course, is one NSS index for mental health. This is a suicide rate 20 years ago for Chinese people. As you can see, that three features showed in this figure. One is a two-peak. One peak is for youth group. Another peak is for senior elderly. Another feature is that quite a difference between the urban inhabitants and those living countryside, which countryside inhabitants, I mean farmers, had rather higher suicide rate compared with those live in the urban area. The third feature is gender difference. For youth group, young ladies had much higher suicide rate, but for senior elderly, senior male elderly had a much higher suicide rate. So this means that in China, these two groups are quite sensitive and vulnerable, and they belong to the sensitive groups for psychological support and mental health promotion. We have nationwide randomly sampling study for the mental health status of Chinese people, urban inhabitants. We found the similar conclusion, youth group and senior elderly. youth group, especially for college students. I don't know the situation here in India, but in China, Ministry of Education is quite anxious about suicide of students in the campus. We have pay a lot of attention on that and study and try every efforts to provide help for students. But not so much efforts has been paid for the senior elderly. I think the similar trends here in India too. Not only that, in the United States, there's a similar study, but on self-esteem, had a similar conclusion. Youth group and senior group, senior elderly group, are lowest in self-esteem. So this is a kind of a cross-cultural similarity. I mean, those two groups are very vulnerable to negative mental health status. Of course, the reason for this is quite different. For youth group, they are stressed with job marketing, emotional issues, learning burden, all kinds of things like that. But for senior group, the resources, many resources being impaired. For example, the social interrelationship, income, and also physical health. So they are in the end of lifespan, they face more stress, and their quality of life keeping decreasing, so which is, of course, negative for them. Given that cross-sectional study has proved that senior elderly are vulnerable, what about the longitudinal study? Say, after Reformation, how about the mental health status of the elderly? So Chinese government, Chinese Natural Science Foundation did not support the longitudinal study because it takes a longer time and it's not so productive. So we use cross-temporal meta-analysis to reviewing those published studies on the mental health issues. We find references on 5 indices. For example, life satisfaction, happiness, depression, and quality of life. So I don't have time to go detail with these methods, but I suggest those students here, you better understand this technique because it's a quantitative reviewing technique, which is very useful for you to, when you step in a new area, to find the general conclusion in a certain area is a certain measure, okay? For example, for months we use a measure for happiness. We have a lot of study published use this measure in the last 10 years, okay? This measure, I suppose you are familiar, so I don't go to the detail. It's quite popularly used around the world, and the same in China, of course. And we use also CESD, which is depression measure for elderly population. It's also quite popularly used around the world. Very short, just 20 items. So we found that for CESD studies, we have many published every year, but very few can be included in the meta-analysis because the report did not provide enough data. For example, the means, the estimated error, standard error, and so on. So even those very few references can be included every year, but still the sample size is reasonably large. Okay, so in general, the MONS and CSD, the two measures, we have 35 studies can be included, and 20 studies can be included for meta-analysis, which represent very large population around China. Okay, so this is the general conclusion for the depression status of elderly. Make a sample from 1998 to 2008. Okay, the elderly with depression symptom keep increasing. Okay, this is a sample conclusion. Significantly increasing, as shown in this figure. But the happiness keeps stable. Okay. Everybody knows that China has been getting, quality of life expenditure keep increasing, and income, individual income and familial income keep increasing. Seems that everybody enjoy or benefit from the economic reformation, quality of life, opportunity of education, opportunity of circulation, free circulation, all getting better and better. But how about elderly? This meta-analysis found that for elderly, the happiness keeps stable, but the depression keep increasing. Well, this is more or less in parallel with Professor David Mayer's study in the United States. He found that personal income for United States people in the States has tripled or even 4 times increased. But those who feel happy, very happy, kept 30%, 33%, okay, 1/3. All population, all the time, 1/3. So happiness as a positive mental status seems differently interfered by factors like societal development, economic development, and so on. I would like to know what's the situation here in India for the elderly. I'm quite sure that you have a similar study has been done. Okay, this is David Mayer's study, and he had a series of study on this. How about the happiness and the income? And he found that there's a differentiation beyond the average income. Okay. Any questions? You have a question? Okay. Go ahead. Yes, please. Sorry, I cannot hear you. Can you give the microphone? Yes, thanks.
If I got you right, according to the Munch scale, the ratio of happiness is relatively stable, although the depression in the elderly is increasing.
Yeah, the differentiate.
Yeah, so does that mean that the subjective meaning of happiness altogether is being altered by the elderly?
Thank you for the question. Have a seat, please. So it raised another question, how you measure the mental health issues, mental health status, okay. If you measure in positive indices like happiness, you will get to the conclusion quite different with if you use negative indices like depression, anxiety, even SCO90. So that's why I always encourage my students to use both sides, to use different indices to make it balanced. Okay, so mental health status can be measured in many different measures, but for the elderly, it's very important to use the both negative and positive measure. And also, as we know that elderly are not the same group, okay? There's a youth, elderly, say younger than 74, and those in the middle, say 75 to 80 to 79, and those older than 80, because their quality of life, their physical health and mental health is quite different. But as long as the aging process, both negative and positive indices or measures keep increasing, like satisfaction of life, depression, both keep increasing along with the aging process. This is our results. I don't know what's your results here in India, but the simple suggestion is that you use both. Okay, never use a single measure, otherwise you will have the wrong direction conclusion. Okay, thank you. Yes, please.
About income, health, education, and also about relationships, about all these measures, the data from India are available. From Niman, some studies are done. We have also carried out, and whatever trend you are showing, it is tallying with that. There is a linear relationship between happiness and income. Whatever trend you are showing.
Sorry, I cannot hear clearly.
Whatever trend you are showing, this is showing a linear relationship between income and happiness. Okay, the straight line curve. Straight line, the linear curve.
Okay, you mean in India?
Yes. India data also, we have similar data. It's confirming and to the same trend. And also we have some other measures. We have some literature is available on happiness, where it says that health, relations, income,
sure,
education, all these are positive propeller of happiness.
Okay.
There is these are bidirectional relation or bidirectional causality. There cannot be any cause-effect relationship. Even if you have taken income on y-axis and x-axis happiness, but the relationship is bidirectional. It is bidirectional causality. Say for example, if my health is more, I will be happy. Also, if I am happy, my health is better. So therefore, there is bidirectional causality or correlational type of relationship.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. You mentioned the religious belief, which is very good. We do have a study. We compare elderly after the Wenchuan earthquake. As you know, that this is tremendous loss. We compare those elderly with and without religious belief. Those with Buddhist belief have a lower mental health status than those without. So this is just reverse our expectation. So we found that cognitive dissonance for those believer in facing those tremendous loss of life and loss of family treasure, and we continue to measure. We found that within 4 months, this difference decreased. I mean, from cognitive dissonance to cognitive reappraisal, it will take about 4 months for those with religious belief. Yes, yes, please.
Sir, you said that when you were talking about the happiness scale, that the satisfaction increases. So you related the happiness with the personal income, but totally unaware of the culture of China, I would like to know other satisfactory factors that keep them happy as they age, besides the income.
Yeah, thank you. Well, happiness is it's quite a different with the satisfaction of life, because we found that for elderly, it's very easy for them to increase the satisfaction of life. Simple help from the social worker or psychologist in the community can double or even triple their satisfaction of life. But the depression can only be decreased by family member. Social worker has nothing to do with negative emotional status. Okay, so that's why I always suggest that we need to have work together with a family member in a long-term care setting, in the community setting, in the familial care setting, because concerning the negative emotion and positive emotion, we can work very good for the positive emotion, but not for the negative emotion. So that's what we got from our study. Okay, thank you. Yes, Yanak.
Thank you. Very fascinating presentation. But let me suggest that in our traditional agrarian family structure, parents would like, if they have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children.
In my generation in China, yes, but not
Yes.
now.
Then some of them remain with parents and pursue the same profession which particularly father was doing. So, for example, I come from the caste which is traditionally a priest caste. So, suppose that is not the case. Traditionally, a priest caste person would like that couple of his children, out of so many, continue to remain the practice of, priest. Like parents would like, if they have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 children.
In my generation in China, yes, but not
Yes.
now.
Then some of them remain with parents and pursue the same profession which particularly father was doing. So, for example, I come from the caste which is traditionally a priest caste. So, suppose that is not the case. Traditionally, a priest caste person would like that couple of his children, out of so many, continue to remain the practice of, priest, like people in various ceremonies. Marriage ceremony, and we have n number of ceremonies. And it also pays. They also get modest income out of it. And then the parents will be very happy.
Sure.
If all children are gone somewhere, they will be very unhappy.
Sure.
So that has been the traditional family structure and all that.
Yeah.
But when I am saying, I think we are sitting in a big urban setup. But still the majority of families are like that in India. So a colleague may present a study like yours based on convenient urban population
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
may come up with the same finding.
Yes.
But
Yes.
if the same study is conducted in rural area or my village where I am rooted, the finding will be different,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I can see lot of unhappiness in among the parents in my village whose children are gone elsewhere,
Yeah.
migrated as laborers or skilled workers or somewhat.
Yeah. We call it empty nest.
Yes. Now, I used to hear about China that parents would also practice this approach in their family system.
Mm-hmm.
So, but with one child policy, probably the China is different now.
Sure. Sure.
But what would be your response if the traditional China is there, then is income play a critical role, or is relationship with the family, children, and their children's spouses would play the major role?
Thank you very much, Yanak, for the good comments and ideas. Yes, indeed. Given that China is developed a very quick urbanization, along with the only child policy for over 30 years, almost 40 years actually, the family structure keeps changing. Given that tradition and culture still in heritage, but the family dynamic between generations and between the couples differ a lot. Okay, this is let me going on. Okay. So longevity, I will skip the longevity because of time, for the sake of time. But it worthy to mention that in the new century, 125 scientific question has been raised along the census globally by the senior scientists. One of it, how much can human life can span be extended? Okay, how much longer human being can live, and the longevity. This is a scientific question. I don't have time to go to the details for the longevity part because of discussion, but we found that conscientiousness is a top factor, which means responsible for your own responsibility. I mean, sensitive to that, take the responsibility, and be responsible from early childhood. It's the most important predictor for longevity, okay? So do have your kids have homework or housework. Okay, do some housework from childhood. That's a training process for sense of conscientiousness, okay? Of course, a sense of control is very important. The next predictor for longevity, even in the long-term care setting, okay? And religiosity, let's come to the next for predictor. I think this is maybe a good news, especially for Indian population. And cheerfulness, okay? I mean, positive emotion, it's a daily basis. It's a very good predictor. Of course, nutrition is important, complete nutrition. the quantity of social relationship is very important, not the quality. Be careful, because if you focus on the quality, you will narrow your social network. For we psychologists to attend as many as you can attend the conference. That's a good suggestion. Okay. For example, Centennial Convention in Cancun. And for marriage, it's a bit different for male and female. Well, for women, the quality of marriage is most important. Okay? And friendship, of course, along with the social network, the quality. And of course, some basic genetic factors matter, of course, given that it's only 15% as suggested by WHO, but the telomere and telomerase is very important, which is quite sensitive to the daily depress or daily stress, as Professor Elizabeth Blackburn proved. This is also a frontier area I suggest you to young scholars to study, which is very productive. Telomere and telomerase. And non-study, I will, as finished by Professor David Snowden, has proved three general conclusions. The first one is a written language. Its ability of written language is very important. I mean, vocabulary, grammar, correctness of grammar, it's very important. Predictor for longevity. He restudied those reports when those nuns get into at, say, 20 years old, and found that those who have good written language has a much higher possibility of longevity. Okay. The second one is positivity in written language. Okay. Describe the daily life with a positive attitude has a much higher possibility of longevity, and which can predict over 70% of longevity. So it's very good. So positive emotion and good ability of language. This is very important. This is I always suggest my students to learn how to write poetry. This is a good way to train in language. Okay. And brain anatomy and behavioral performance is not as the same. Okay. So as I don't have time to go to detail, but I'll recommend the book about the non-study. We don't have time to go to the Daoism in detail, but 5 elements theory in China is traditional philosophy. Chinese people consider human being as a physical body, mental body, and unity between human and nature. So that's traditional Chinese medicine, acupoints, energy, vitality circulating around the body, how to get cured, how people get disease, how have the disease get cured, and how to cultivate at a daily basis. For example, play Tai Chi, okay? For exercising, there's a study say that what method is use it or lose it. I mean, physical exercise, engaging in a pleasant activity and carry on. Carry on is important, okay? You do it every day, and you will get the cumulative effect. And one of my colleagues in the institute had run several very good studies on the effect of Tai Chi playing And she found that the cortex, thickness of cortex can be improved by the practice, and also the working memory function can be improved. This is a very beautiful line, linear effect, along with time of practicing. The longer, the better. Very beautiful study. Of course, she had many studies on similar, but I don't have time to go to details. And also calligraphy. You know, Chinese, the art of Chinese are quite different with any other language in the world. We have calligraphy. The empirical study proved the effect, relaxation training, and for calligraphy, many similar empirical study proved that the mental health status, the relaxation status, and also negative emotion can be changed through the calligraphy intervention. Okay, this is a tradition for Chinese seal cutting. It's a very good way of personal cultivation on a daily basis. Focus your attention and mindfulness, all kinds of similar things like meditation. Okay, but of course there are some aesthetic components there, which will improve your harmony, intrapersonal harmony. Okay, and I don't have time to go to detail, but calligraphy, seal cutting, and painting are quite a traditional way for Chinese people enjoy the daily life. Okay, you can see this kind of artwork everywhere, but for the couplets, it's very special for Spring Festival. Every family has these couplets, which means good wishes and indication the familial tradition and culture. Of course, this is a basis for Chinese poetry. Okay, this is a happy memory for every Chinese from the childhood. The couplets will be changed during the Spring Festival, especially the first day of the year. And so this is kind of a tradition embedded in Chinese memory for happiness. Okay, because Spring Festival is always a occasion for family reunion. And now let me recommend 3 books for young scholars. The first one is A Peaceable Psychology, which is written by my supervisor, Professor Alban Duke. He criticized the imperialism of modern psychology because the presumption of cultural equilibrium is not appropriate. And then he suggests that all psychologists, especially clinical psychologists, should learn from Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ died for human being. This kind of softness, while the psychologists, especially clinical psychologists, especially Freudian psychologists, enjoy the superiority and setting the clear boundary between the clients and psychotherapists. So this is no good in the long run for the human being well-being. Okay. Now, thirdly, he suggests that the true healing can only come from the community setting, community tradition, because the lifespan development of mental health concepts and approaches to the mental disorders are developed, embedded in the community culture. Okay, like that Spring Festival. Okay, so this is the first book I recommend you read. Second book is this, Crazy Like Us. This book, look the subtitle, The Globalization of the American Psyche, criticize the promotion of modern psychology, simply ignore the cultural differences. as mentioned yesterday by Rolando, that research globalized, but you got to find a local solution. While local solution, for example, healing, is based on the community-based culture. Okay, so this book criticizes the concepts raised by American psychologists, for example, PTSD and ADHD and anorexia, bulimia, as long as it's promoted around the globe, all the occurrence of those problems keep increasing. Okay, so this is problematic, and I recommend young scholars, if you want to use Western psychology measure, you got to be sensitive to your local culture, because the dynamic can be different, and also the healing procedure can be different. Okay, and the last book I want to recommend is Aging with Grace, which is written by Professor David Snowden. Sorry, I could not find the English version, but this is a Chinese version cover. I had introduced briefly earlier about this book. If you read it, you can find the spiritual components, the importance of spiritual components for those nuns, and how they help each other over 60, 70, 80 years. Okay, so the social networking with spiritual components and the dedication to the group life is very important, in addition to the language ability, in addition to the positivity, interpreting daily life. Okay. So thank you very much.